Hello and welcome. It's 10 a.m. on Monday, the 6th of October. You're tuned in to our mid-morning newscast here on ARIRANG TV. It's great that you could join us. I'm Mark Broome. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. A US-based think tank says there's evidence North Korea has partially or completely stopped the operation of its main nuclear facility. A member of the North Korean delegation that came to the south over the weekend told South Korean officials the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is healthy and remains in charge. Plus, the endgame seems to have begun in Hong Kong as demonstrators regroup at their main protest site. Hong Kong's China-backed leader says protests must end by this Monday morning or all necessary actions will be taken to restore order. But our top story this morning, North Korea appears to have shut down a 5-megawatt reactor at its key nuclear site, one of its major sources of weapons-grade plutonium. While it's not clear why the activity at the site has ceased, a US-based institute suggests the shutdown could be to allow for partial refueling or renovations. Al Kwon-soa reports.
Activity at North Korea's main nuclear site may have come to a partial or complete halt. Citing recent satellite imagery, the US-based Institute for Science and International Security says a comparison of images made in August and September with earlier ones shows a lack of steam venting from the 5-megawatt reactor's turbine and a lack of water being discharged from its cooling system. The U.S. think tank says the reason for the shutdown is not clear, but it could be for refueling or renovation, raising concerns radioactive plutonium could be extracted during this process. The reactor is a main source of the North's weapons-grade material. It's estimated the reactor can produce 6 kilograms of plutonium a year, which is enough for one nuclear bomb. Nuclear tests have been conducted using plutonium produced at the Yongbyon reactor in previous years, including North Korea's most recent nuclear test in February of last year. A couple of months after that, Pyongyang said it would restart its aged reactor at the Yongbyon nuclear complex amid high regional tensions. The reactor had been shut down in 2007 under an Aid for Disarmament Accord. The think tank also reports that activity has been spotted in other parts of the nuclear site. Satellite imagery shows roofs being renovated at another plant on the south side of the site that's known to store centrifuges which are used to enrich uranium. But the institute added it wasn't sure whether the expansion of the centrifuges had been completed. Kwon-soa, Arirang News.
Now, 2 high-level U.S. officials are in the South Korean capital of Seoul today for talks. U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Daniel Russell and Assistant Secretary of Defense David Shear held talks with South Korea's Deputy Foreign Minister Lee Kyung-soo earlier this morning and are currently sitting down with South Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se. Now, this trip comes after North Korea sent a high-level delegation to Seoul for a very rare one-day visit on Saturday. No details about today's talks have been released quite yet, but the two sides are expected to have exchanged views on their North Korea policy given that visit. Washington's ongoing discussions with Tokyo over revising defense cooperation guidelines are also sure to come up, as are the annual defense ministerial talks between Seoul and Washington that are slated to be held in the U.S. capital later this month. Now, North Korea pretty much caught everyone off guard over the weekend by sending that high-level delegation to South Korea on Saturday for talks that will reportedly launch a new round of full-scale negotiations between the two Koreas by next month. It was during these talks that one of the North Korean officials said that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is doing fine health-wise, denying reports that he's been sick with gout or other ailments. Our Connie Kim reports.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has not been spotted in public for more than a month, raising speculation and questions among outsiders about possible health problems. But an insider says there's nothing to report. Kim Jong-un, who has been the North's top policymaker in charge of inter-Korean affairs since 2007, told South Korean Unification Minister Ryu Gil-jae during informal talks on Saturday that the young North Korean leader was fine. Ryu said he had no reason to believe Kim Jong-un was not being forthright. In addition to meeting with Kim, Ryu also met with the man regarded as the North's second most powerful, Hwang Byung-seo. Ryu says Hwang asked him to deliver a heartful greeting to President Park Geun-hye. The high-level delegation from North Korea, which also included the top North Korean military official Choi Ryong-hae, made a rare, brief, and unexpected trip south of the border this weekend. Word that they would be attending the closing ceremony of the Asian Games in the South Korean port city of Incheon on Saturday came just one day earlier. It's raising expectations of a thaw in inter-Korean tensions. During the visit, the two Koreas agreed to hold a round of high-level talks later this month or next. Topics up for discussion could include the resumption of reunions for families separated by the Korean War and a restart of tours to North's Mount Kumgang Resort. If the high-level talks do take place, they would represent just the second of their kind since the leaderships of the two Koreas took power, the other coming in February. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
Now, the surprise visit by those three high-level North Korean officials to the south on Saturday has everyone scratching their heads about their motive. Experts on Korean affairs in the U.S. believe it was an attempt by Pyongyang to try and step out of its international isolation. Joel Witt, who runs the 38 North website, which includes lots of analysis about North Korea, says the trip bodes well for the future of North-South relations, but he didn't really have much of a clue about the motive. Bruce Klingner of the Heritage Foundation said the visit was made in part as an appeal to the international community for them to lift sanctions against North Korea. Now, the war-renouncing article of the Japanese constitution has been chosen as the most likely candidate to win this year's Nobel Peace Prize. That's set to be announced later this week, on Friday, in fact. If this becomes reality, the Abe administration in Japan could come under great international pressure to rein in its military ambitions. Our Son Jung-in reports.
Each year, the Oslo Peace Research Institute forecasts the most likely winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, and this time it has selected Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution. The institute noted the article's renunciation of war and the use of force assume much greater importance amid military tensions in Ukraine and other parts of the world. The article renounces the right to engage in war and rejects the use of force as a means of settling international disputes. However, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's reinterpretation of the article in July caused the protests to erupt in Japan. Against Abe's approach to allow for military expansion, Naomi Takasu, an ordinary housewife from Kanagawa Prefecture, initiated a campaign to highlight Article 9 in the Nobel Peace Prize selection. After garnering more than 400,000 signatures, the Norwegian Nobel Committee tasked with picking the peace laureate accepted his recommendation to include Article 9 as a candidate in April. Among the other contenders this year are Pope Francis, Congolese gynecologist Denis Mukwege, and UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. If Japanese peace activists clinch the prize, it will likely put intense pressure on the Abe government to step back from its military ambitions. The Nobel Peace Prize winner will be announced on Friday. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
Now back here in South Korea, and the National Assembly will begin its annual parliamentary hearings on Tuesday. Standing committees will call in officials from close to 700 government offices over a 20-day period to question them on their spending and the implementation of policies. The ruling Saenuri Party says it hopes the inspections focus on tackling administrative issues and coming up with policy alternatives rather than becoming extra causes of political strife. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy says it's most concerned about inspecting offices related to April's Seoul ferry disaster. Now, there are already worries that the long, drawn-out dispute over a special bill to investigate the sinking of that ferry will prevent the audits running in a smooth and timely manner. Now, let's get you caught up on some of the latest global headlines we're following at this hour with our Eunice Kim standing by at the news centre. Good morning, Eunice.
Good morning, Mark.
Now, day has dawned in Hong Kong, which means the government imposed deadline for pro-democracy protesters to clear out has now passed. What's the situation looking like right now?
Well, Mark, it looks pretty calm right now on the streets of Admiralty, which is where those government buildings are located. No police action and a noticeably thinner crowd than those we saw last week. Overnight, thousands of young people remained and rallied, and they did call for democracy in Hong Kong, as they have been. Many demonstrators withdrew from the Mong Kok district, saying they would join the main protest site in Admiralty. Hong Kong's embattled chief executive C.Y. Leung had promised public offices and schools in the paralyzed financial hub would reopen on this Monday, even if it took police force to get things back to normal. Protesters and government officials are said to be in dialogue to discuss the format of future talks, as over the weekend, violent clashes between pro-democracy demonstrators and people opposing the protests broke out in the gritty Mong Kok district. Police said they arrested 19 people on Saturday, adding that 8 of them were a part of organized crime gangs. In the U.S., the director of the CDC, Tom Frieden, says America's first Ebola patient, Thomas Eric Duncan, is fighting for his life, slipping back into a state of critical condition after showing some initial improvement. He said experimental drugs were not being used in Duncan's treatment in fear that they would worsen his conditions. Frieden also said his agency received well over 100 inquiries on suspicious cases in recent months, and while several were false alarms, he confirmed they were watching about 50 people for a period of 21 days, which is Ebola's maximum incubation period. He added hospital staff were observing a homeless man who had come into contact with Duncan. He is being described as a low-risk individual, though, and is at a Dallas area hospital for evaluation. A local official says Kurdish forces engaged in some of their heaviest battles so far against Islamic State militants in the border frontier of Syria and Turkey. The official told Reuters there were very heavy bomb shelling and machine gun fire as the jihadist fighters were now a mere kilometer away from southeast Kobani. Reports also said IS fighters have taken a strategic hill overlooking the predominantly Kurdish town. CNN reports the Turkish government was using tear gas and water cannons against people trying to join the IS fight across the border. Some 5 people were wounded in Turkey after a projectile was fired across the border. And Brazil's incumbent President Dilma Rousseff will face her center-right challenger, Aécio Neves, in a runoff vote in about 3 weeks' time. Elections in the world's 7th largest economy wrapped early this morning, Seoul time, and with most of the ballots counted, it showed Rousseff had 41% against Neves' 34%. And in another twist, the popular former Environment Minister Marina Silva only took 21% of the vote. Election watchers had expected her to challenge Rousseff in a runoff vote after she held a double-digit lead in the polls, but that does not seem to be the case now. Voters also selected a federal parliament and state governors in this round of elections.
Get connected to Korea and the world. Join us every weekday for the latest developments out of Korea, Asia, and beyond. On air, on your mobile, and online, we lead the way every day. ARIRANG News.
To try and resolve the crisis in Ukraine, the European Union also offers $15 billion. Now, the value of the Japanese yen has dropped by more than twice the value of the Korean won over the past 3 months on the back of the strengthening US dollar. An index tracking the greenback against 6 other major currencies shows the dollar recorded a near 8% gain since the end of June. The Japanese yen dropped 7.6% to the greenback to around 110 yen last month. The Korean won fell by a mere 4% during the same period. This has also affected Korea's foreign exchange reserves, which contracted for the second consecutive month in September to $364.4 billion. A local think tank expects the Korean government to grow 3.6% next year. That projection from the Hyundai Research Institute is lower than the 4% forecast made by the government and central bank back in July. The institute cited a number of factors in its report, as you'd expect. Domestically, they come in the form of the strong local currency, decreasing raw material prices and rising household debt. Internationally, the institute says slowing global demand and growing competition with China in overseas markets are likely to keep growth down. To turn the tide, the think tank suggests the government continue to aggressively pursue its expansionary policies. Now it's time for this week's Industry Insight, and trying some Korean street food is part of the travel experience when coming to Korea for a vacation. You literally can't avoid a stall while walking around the streets. When we say street food, we are talking about food like tteokbokki, sundae and odeng, to name but a few. These dishes are actually so popular that one business is taking the street out of street food and serving these dishes at its restaurants, not only here in Korea, but around Asia and even in the U.S. Our Shin Se-min reports.
It certainly looks different. It's not the spicy red gochujang-based paste tteokbokki that we're used to, and these miniature kimbaps called bari are different in their size, but they're tasty. And even though they come at a higher price than the traditional dish that inspired them, people dig them. Here, popular Korean street food, or punshik, is served with a high-end touch. School Food, a franchise Korean restaurant, is making money by offering an upscale version of Korean street food like kimbap or, say, tteokbokki in a spicy carbonara sauce.
I come here often because you can't get these type of tteokbokki elsewhere.
So I've tried school food before in Hong Kong, and I've been there twice, and that's why I would quite like to try the original restaurant in Seoul. It offers like fusion Korean food, which is very different to traditional Korean food.
Since starting out 12 years ago, the franchise has beefed up in size with 80 stores nationwide. Last year, School Food posted sales of $85 million.
This is a new type of Korean food. A twist to the already tasty Korean dish is what attracts both Korean and foreign diners. And people like that they can enjoy casual Korean food in a nice, clean restaurant.
And it's going global, with a total of 10 restaurants in places like Hong Kong, Jakarta, Bangkok, Hanoi, and Los Angeles. You've come this far, and what's the toughest part of your job in expanding your business overseas? I mean, in the global market, school food is not yet well known. Is it going to be a tough road ahead?
Of course, it is a difficult road ahead, even with our dish. I mean, although this uniqueness gathers attention regardless of nationality, this will wear out, and people will get bored. But just as customers still pay visits to McDonald's and Starbucks over other stores, my ultimate goal is to establish the brand image in their minds so they come back years after.
Lee says he has been receiving a number of calls from people overseas who are interested in opening up school food restaurants abroad. And while that's something he welcomes over the long term, Lee says he first wants to tackle the Southeast Asian market, where the palates of diners are similar to those here in Korea. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
And a good Monday morning to you all as we kick things off with our final Incheon Asian Games coverage. Now on Sunday, the South Korean athletes and delegation held a separate disbanding ceremony marking the end of the Asian Games. Now led by the Chief of Delegation Park Soon-ho, 100 members of the athlete and delegation came together to celebrate their successful finish, with many of them thanking some of the volunteers who were with them during the 16 days of the competition. Now, Park added that they're all heroes and they did their very best in making sure Korea finished second in the medal standings for the 5th straight time. Meanwhile, not much rest for some of these athletes as the annual National Sports Festival is set to kick off in Jeju starting on the 28th. And just like I mentioned, Korea was able to finish second to China for the 5th straight time in the medal count. So let's take a final look at the medal standings at the Incheon Asian Games. Well, taking a look here, no surprise here with China as they finished first once again, this time with 151 gold medals. South Korea unable to achieve their goal of 90 or more gold medals, but they do finish with 79 gold, 71 silver, and 84 bronze medals for a total of 234 medals. Japan, meanwhile, a distant third with 47, and Kazakhstan and Iran make the top 5. Meanwhile, Thailand just ahead of North Korea as North Korea finishes in top 10 for the first time in 12 years as they finish with 11 gold medals, with India, Chinese Taipei, and Qatar making the top 10. Well, the 2014 Incheon Asian Games officially ended on Saturday with the closing ceremony, but it also meant that the Incheon Asian MVP had to be chosen as well. And to no surprise, it was Japan's Kosuke Hagino. Now, the 20-year-old Japanese swimmer who dominated the swimming events by winning 4 gold medals, 1 silver, and 2 bronze medals, was voted as the most valuable player at the 17th Asian Games. The award, which was given out by the Samsung Group, was voted on by 1,600 journalists. Meanwhile, some of the nominees also included South Korean fencer Nam Hyun-hee, South Korean judo athlete Kim Jae-bum, and North Korean weightlifter Kim Eun-guk. Well, it's been a while, but let's move on to other news in the other parts of the world. Starting off in the LPGA, where South Korea's Lee Mi-ring came back to win the 2014 Rainwood LPGA Classic on Sunday. Now, after starting off the final round tied for third, the South Korean storms back with 5 birdies and a bogey to finish first with 15 under par overall to claim the title and her second LPGA title of her career. Meanwhile, Park Eun-bi, who hoped to finish with another title before her wedding, finished tied for third at 12 under par overall. And now finishing things off in baseball and over to the majors, where the 2014 MLB playoffs is currently taking place. And for the LA Dodgers, who tied their best-of-5 series against the St. Louis Cardinals at 1 game apiece, will now rely on HYUN-JIN to give them the series lead. The South Korean lefty, who's been sidelined with an inflammation on his left shoulder, will return to the mound in time for Game 3 of the NLDS on Monday. And that's good news for manager Don Mattingly, as HYUN-JIN won his first playoff game against the Cardinals last season when he threw 7 innings of shutout ball while giving up just 4 hits. Meanwhile, the 14-7 HYUN-JIN is set to face off against the 14-10 John Lackey. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. Mostly sunny skies will be featured in many regions all day long, but due to the influence of the 18th typhoon of the season, Fan, strong gusty winds will sweep the southern coastal regions and Jeju into tomorrow. But for the rest of the country, today is shaping up to be another typical autumn day. Chilly morning lows and mild afternoon will continue, but in fact, today is forecast to be the chilliest day of the season. So with that said, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. Now, the daytime highs in the capital will be at 21. Daegu and Busan will rise to 22, while Gwangju will peak at 23 this afternoon. Now, for other regions, it looks like Jeju Island and Daejeon will see highs of 21 and Dokdo peaks at 16. Well, the weather outlook for the rest of the week is looking calm and cool. Lows will be on the chilly side in the low to mid-teens, while the daytime highs will only make it to low to mid-20s as well. So don't forget to dress in layers to keep yourself warm. And that's all for Korea. And here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all we have for now. Have a great day or night, wherever you're watching us. Stay tuned to ARIRANG TV as well. We'll be back with another newscast at noon Korea time. That's in about 90 minutes. Until then, goodbye.